Hi, I'm Samuel Baum here at BeyBey in Sunset Harbor in beautiful Miami Beach. Looking forward to chatting.
All right, Sam from BeyBey, what's up, my man?
Yeah.
Good to have you, man. I know you're super busy, F1 weekend, but I want to get into your origin story. There's no easy business, but you picked a tough industry, right? Hospitality, restaurant stuff. I'm crazy about getting into, or how I got into my business. Talk to me about how you got into the space and a little bit about your background.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for being here. Yeah, look, I'm born and raised in Miami, and essentially if you don't work in South and Central American finance, development, then you better get into hospitality if you want to work down here. So really that's how I got involved. You know, growing up, I was always fascinated with it, right? Miami Beach was in a very different place in the 90s and the 80s. And but you sort of saw this vestige of its early true glories, right? It really just made a comeback in the 90s. And to watch that sort of regrowth through the early sort of nightlife heydays, the excitement, the enthusiasm, the beauty, the sexiness, and the way that people were sort of taking these incredible bones of the Art Deco neighborhood and putting things back together, right? And then all of a sudden you're seeing these gorgeous buildings go up and all of a sudden new people are moving here. It was a really exciting time to be down here. And when you start getting fascinated with that as a youth, right? There was a lot of really interesting people that had came down here that were really pioneers in the space, right? And you could start to recognize these people because they really cut through the audiences. They were really makers. There were people who really had a vision. And by connecting with those kinds of people, both, you know, as a friend, as a consumer, and as somebody who was really interested in learning more about it, you really start to develop this different sense and perspective on experience, right? Because in the end, that's what all of it is. Nightlife, food and beverage, hotels, all of that stuff is all really part of this, creating this fantasy that becomes something that is really tangible and people can really get involved with and build a relationship with. And I think that Miami Beach, because of its unique nature and sort of authenticity, made that something that people really deeply connected with, right? Different than other cities that they sort of had built it really like that Disneyfication thing, right? As a great counterpoint to Miami, right? Orlando, everything is total facade, right? In Miami, there was a history of hospitality. It is an island, right? It is tropical. These are real qualities of the city. And so using those as a foundation to build around, if you got it, man, you really couldn't get it out of your system and really get into your head and really become part of your personality. And that's how I got involved.
So, I mean, Miami's the curator of cool, right? You think Basel, Windward Walls, you know, the heydays of South Beach, I mean, on and on, its evolution. Man, how do you stay hip? How do you stay cool?
Well, I think that the reason that those things really ended up here, right? Because a lot of those were cultural moments or institutions or individuals, like the early days of Prince coming down here and opening Glam Slam, stuff like that. I think it's because Miami's a very inspiring place naturally, right? So people who are creative, they come down here and they feel it. They look around, the beauty, the color of the sunsets, the golden hours, the lush tropical nature, right? And then sort of the interesting mix mash of people who have ended up here through different waves of tourism and all of that. But more importantly, who came here, it's who stays here, right? You kind of have to have a certain sensibility, and it's so particular and unique in versus the rest of the country that if you get it, you know, then like you want to bring cool things here because it's such a great platform to do cool things, you know? And so Basel and art, such an amazing experience for people from all over the world to come here and sort of put the interesting creativity of the art in the context of the city, this tropical paradise. Same thing with like Miami Music Week, right? Winter Music Conference originally, Ultra Music Festival. I mean, like, where would you rather be to listen to great music and dance and express yourself and feel free? You know, same thing with like wine and food, right? The food scene, which took a little bit longer to catch on here, right? Like chefs started moving down here and they were like, why would I want to leave, right? They came here on vacation to do a pop-up and they were like, wait a second. They're like, why am I going back to a cold, dark city where no one's open-minded? They're like, let's stay down here and try new things because there's really a sense of open-mindedness, I think, to Miami that allows these kinds of things to really flourish. You know, you got to be patient building them because it's a smaller city, it's a growing city.
And it's a pretty young city when you really think about it.
It's incredibly young, you know, especially in terms of this paradigm of it, right? And also, it's like it was built, and it's being built right now, you know. And that makes it really exciting because there's so much opportunity here.
So much opportunity. Your background, you worked at Red Bull, one of the great marketing brands. I mean, it's an energy drink, but now when you think about it, it's racing, it's all these adventure sports, it's on and on. Takeaways from working there for so many years that you brought into your current business?
It's interesting. The reason that I was brought into Red Bull was because of sort of the stuff that I was doing entrepreneurial in the culture space in Miami, right? Like we were just talking about. And Red Bull was actually one of our sponsors and partners on some of the larger events and programs we were doing during our Basel. We used to do one of the first big things in Wynwood called Basel Castle. And Red Bull was amazing at supporting that, but their support was relatively basic, right? And their team from Austria, where they're originally from, you know, it's created in Thailand, but really the company is Austrian, and Santa Monica, where their North American headquarters are, they came down to see what this whole Basel thing was really about. And they came and saw what we were doing, and they just thought that it was really special. And we were bringing together sort of youth culture of Miami, the Miami art scene, which had been a bit underrepresented. And we had also started to notice from years and years of doing stuff during Basel, throwing parties and hosting, that there was this amazing national, if not international crowd of other kinds of creatives, right? People from different disciplines like fashion and graphic design and, you know, even commercial like creative agency type people that weren't really being sort of, I guess, recognized as what we felt were the real VIPs. We're like, oh, this is an art fair, right? These are the creatives. These are the people who really get it, right? And instead, a lot of it was being catered towards very super rich collectors, which I understand from a business perspective, right? But it kind of was missing the point, I felt, from what it actually was about, from a non-business perspective. And so that's what we really focused our events and parties and festivals on, was like highlighting that, inviting that, making them the most important people, because we didn't have that business model. I was like, I don't care if there's a bunch of super rich people here. I was like, we're not selling tables. You know, like, we want to have a fun party. So let's make a party for those kinds of people, which of course made the rich people be like, wait, what are they doing over there? Right, we want to get involved in that. So, you know, Red Bull was this incredible marketing business and company, but truly it was led by the sort of separate vision that the owner had, right? Dietrich Mateschitz, total visionary businessman, especially from a marketer, truly one of the all-time greats. And he really believed in the tagline, the catchline of Red Bull gives you wings, right? Yeah. And that's what he really wanted, right? So he didn't want Red Bull going and, you know, putting a sign up at an event.
Like everybody else,
like, hey, guys, we're Red Bull. Yeah. No, he really wanted to give wings to ideas. So he saw what we were doing in Miami as an idea. And he's like, how do we give wings to that? Yeah. So they came to me and several other folks like me around the country, and they were like, how do we support what you're doing and those kinds of ideas in a way that's really gonna help those things grow and really help the people behind those see their visions in a bigger way. And that's what I did. I wound up coming on board and sort of going around the country and then eventually around the world, sort of identifying these kinds of, you know, fertile ground, these kinds of well springs of ideas, and then being like, what do you actually need, right? It's not just signs and a $500 check and a bunch of Red Bull. It was like helping them understand, like, oh, you want to go bigger? Well, is it about finding new content creation, reaching new audiences? Is it about identifying better venues? Is it about figuring out the infrastructure needs that you have, and just really working with them, because a lot of them are young people who were just following their passions, you know. And so that's a lot of what I got to do there, and it goes to that kind of really leadership, you know, that kind of vision, and taking some risks, you know, because not everything worked. Not everybody that you try to work with is going to work well with you, right? But when it does work well, you make magic.
Yeah, and you double down. You're like me. I'm a Miami guy, moved away, gone 15 years, and then I moved right before COVID. And I tell people the transformation of what happened in Miami, from the people, hospitality, to today, Some places COVID was really bad for. I think Miami was really good for. Tell me, in the hospitality dining space, lots of big operators, Carbone Group, all that kind of stuff. Walk me through where you see it today and where do you think it goes over the next couple of years?
Yeah. Well, what happened here around the pandemic and the shutdown and us reopening, it was obviously a confluence of many different situations, right time, right place, some good luck, which is, not being callous to people who, there was a lot of people who really suffered through the pandemic.
Yeah, of course.
From a business
restaurants,
from a health
the worst
perspective, right? Yeah. Like it really had a significant impact in a lot of different ways. Yeah. But in some ways, Miami did just kind of get the other side of that, right? We were the silver lining of the thing. But it didn't start there, right? The truth is the redevelopment of the city had probably started 15 years prior.
Correct.
Right? And we were just teed up for success, right? There had been a lot of development, a lot of new buildings, a lot of professionalism had started to come into, I think, our nightlife and hospitality. I think the Fountain Blue is a great example of something that had been 10 years previous that like made people really be like, oh, everybody needs to step their game up. And also from a development perspective that, oh, there's real opportunity to make significant investments into Miami and something can happen in that, right? And so, things were going in a really good direction. There had been some really amazing successes that were building here organically and locally. Dave Grutman is a great example of that. The stuff that the guys from Space and 3 Points and all of that are a really good example. The Bar Lab guys that they did with Broken Shaker and 27 and the projects that they were working on. There's, Jose Mendez, there's a bunch of great examples. But with the pandemic, right, there was people who had started to explore down here, but really the game changer was the remote work, right? Because Miami had always lacked a economic infrastructure that could support things beyond sort of tourism, hospitality, those kinds of things. And then like a small and slowly, probably healthily growing local population, right? Which was cool because that meant that the people had a different sort of stake in the game. There was a sense of history here, a sense of original culture that came from Miami. The different Cuban and Jewish and Haitian and sort of expat populations that were mixing down here and creating sort of our own thing in the last 20, 30 years, if not 30 years before that. And so when this big influx of outsiders came in, which Miami was not new to, but hadn't particularly been necessarily super welcoming about previous, right? Everyone from Vegas and New York had tried to come down here and be like, people come down during Basel or New Year's. They're like, I know exactly what this city needs and I'm going to plug and play. Wait till you see what I do with Miami, right? Cocaine and vodka sodas will do that to you, right? But then you come back and if you actually followed through and try to do something and you didn't connect with locals, you didn't have people on the ground who knew the city, right? People were very quick to take a step back and be like, oh, you think you know what you're doing without us? Sure. Right. Well, let's see. Yeah. And a lot of those things didn't work if they ever even got open, right? And so with the remote work and the ability of there to be a kind of more stable and high-level economy with people who had jobs in other markets where there were economies, right? They were able to sort of bring some of that paycheck here and enjoy the lifestyle, which was kind of always the tough choice, right? It's like, yeah, you could live in Miami, but you're going to have to hustle because there's not the money. So you kind of before had you got to choose the lifestyle or the economics.
Right, huge, great corporate jobs don't really
exist. Not hanging around down here, right? I had to go I never technically moved from Miami, but technically my job was based out of Atlanta.
There you go.
Right, even for Red Bull. So, I kind of tricked the system. I found a little bit of a loophole. Put a lot of airline miles on. But once you had that remote work, right, then you had that sort of different level of money. And also you had people from different markets that were more supportive of hospitality that come in from different markets, right? And there was also just more money in general, right? So there could be more places coexisting simultaneously, which had been very difficult before, right? The pie was smaller, so there were fewer slices in general, right? As the pie got bigger, you could have more places that could sustain. And to their credit, I think the Carbone guys came down and did just an incredible job, right? Major Food Group made a significant investment down here. And they proved that Miami could, again, raise the bar with great hospitality, great service, great concept. You know, really the consumer experience there is 360.
Yeah.
You know, they really, they know what they're doing. They do an amazing job. And I think that also encouraged others who could do that, right? Other groups came down here, and I think that they were like, hey, we need to come down there. We need to come down there correct.
Right.
It's not a joke of a city.
Yeah.
We need to bring our A game. And I think they've done a better job about trying to integrate locals, top tier locals into that, right? And I think that's where you're seeing a lot more success. And I think you're going to see more of that come, right? Because there's still huge swaths of the city that are just at the tail end of their development. Downtown it's crazy. Is mid-Renaissance, right? Like Alapata is going to be a whole new thing. Midtown and the Design District are still on like the front quarter of that marathon, right?
Little River, like it's crazy.
Mimo, I mean Edgewater. There's still Miami Beach. Miami Beach is arguably is getting to the last quarter before the race really begins of like all the new hospitality. I mean, the Rosewood groups and all these new hotels that are going to be reopening that are really bringing to the next level probably what had been in a bit of a mid-range for a while. And with that is coming the counterpoints from a food and beverage, from an entertainment and nightlife perspective, which, you know, I hope that, and I believe that we are the front end of that new wave, you know.
Talk to me about your restaurant, BeyBey. I come in here, tonight's my first night. But someone comes in here, what do I expect? What's the food? What's the vibe?
So it's interesting. So BeyBey, in a lot of ways, is a response to what we were just talking about, right? A lot of stuff had started to come in from other markets, right? They had very formed identities that were particular to where they were born. And they're great. They're really cool experiences. They definitely seem to be more geared towards tourists. But like we were also just talking about, like not only were there a lot of locals here that moved here for a particular reason, right, and lifestyle, and had developed their own sort of innate culture, but then there was a lot of people who moved here, right? And going to places from where you moved from at first is maybe comforting, but at some point gets boring, right? Like how many times a year does anyone go to Disney, right? How many times a year, unless you're a serious gambler, do you go to Vegas, right? You kind of get the thing and then you're ready to go. And so there needed to be more consistent, locally driven things, right? Places you could go on a more regular basis, places that felt a little bit more welcoming. And so that's really was the motivation for BeyBey and its design. We wanted it to be a restaurant and lounge that felt like a home and had that sort of sense of familiarity and personality that maybe lacks from some of the other places. And also a sort of sense of this is from here. And so that's where it came from. And so we're new, we're less than 2 months open, but things have been going in a great direction. You can expect really good food, right? All of our stuff, we aim for high quality food, high quality service, high quality beverage program, which I happen to be a very big fan of, but also a little bit more low key, right? We don't want it to feel like this is a special occasion place. We want it to feel like it's a place that like you can become a regular at. And then we also know that part of that Miami Beach lifestyle is eccentricity, right? It's excitement, right? People here are lively. You don't move to Miami Beach if you're a major introvert, right? There is a way that you can navigate Miami as a little beach town, but there's a lot of little beach towns that are about 30 minutes away, right? Particularly South Beach, right? And so we tried to incorporate those kinds of moments and opportunities within the space, right? So there's great happy hour, there's a great dinner that can be played up or down. We have 2 different dining spaces. And then if you want to sort of have it be more of a meetup place, more of a social place, come for great cocktails, things get into that direction, and we stay open quite a bit later than most other things in this neighborhood, right? So we're open till 2 a.m. So you can come here, you can really mix it up, you can get a little bit more lively. And then if you really want to go for the full Miami experience, the 24/7 thing, you know, Space
is down the street.
Space and 11 and our friends at Medium Cool, they were like, hey, go ahead. Go right? For it, we're happy to send you on your way, right? There's people who are built for that. So
you talked a little bit about programming. What goes into programming? So it's F1 week, then you got Basel in December. Like, how do you put all your programming together? Or do you do any programming? It's just business as usual every weekend?
No, we definitely do programming. So, I mean, there's programming that happens on a regular basis, and there's programming that happens around big moments, right? And I think that for us, the most important thing is trying to continue to develop as a relatively new concept in an authentic way by connecting with people who are also doing stuff and becoming part of that, right? And so we work with people more on the artistic side, right? Ceramics groups like Ossily, Raw Figs, which is a drawing class down here that's done amazing things all over the city. People like Grape Crush and other wine tasting groups, pop-up chefs, things like that. We even had a Pilates class use one of our place and do this amazing health experience. And then during big moments, we also want to be welcoming, right?
Yeah.
Like there's people coming from all over the world. They need places that are at a certain level to host events, host dinners, do activations. And so we start working on those things pretty far in advance, right? I would say we start thinking a minimum of 3 months in advance, right? But we're really looking at things on an ongoing calendar year, right?
Yeah.
Like there's Miami, new things get added to the calendar if once in its third year, right? But like we knew about that 2 years before, right? So we really try to stay well ahead of those things and see ourselves just on an ongoing basis. And I've been working in different venues and have different projects and doing that for 20 years, right? And so have my partners. So we're right into the rhythm, right? Conversations that we had been happening a year ago were like, hey, check out this new opportunity. And people are like, whoa.
Very cool. So you're unique in that you have a restaurant and a lounge here. How do you...
And an event space.
And an event space.
Yeah.
How do you maintain that consistency through training of your employees? Because I'm sure there's people who are great servers at the restaurant, but then the lounge is a different vibe, and then even the event space. Like, how do you maintain that consistency?
Well, really the credit goes to the operations team, right? Like we work really closely to everything needs to go back to the core vision and sort of ethos of BeyBey, right? Which is be welcoming, be friendly, be a place where people can gather and feel comfortable and at home. And that means that that goes into our branding, it goes into our marketing, it goes into the way that we communicate, and we try to feel a bit atypical, a little bit more creative, a little bit more unique, to sort of share that spirit. But then that certainly translates into the operations, and we try to create overlap between those two spaces and de-silo as much as possible, right? I like spending time with the team who are in service side and answer questions about the music direction or the artwork, right? Yeah. Or why does the furniture feel this way? Or what are we trying to do with our guests, right? How are we trying to make them feel? Which is really important because in the end, they are the biggest touch point that any guest here is going to have with the space, right? We could build the most incredible place ever, and if they have a bad service experience with someone who has no idea what it is, then they're going to be like, oh, well, this is just a sham. It becomes Disney, right? Although they have like the best service. Maybe that should be an aspiration versus a denigration, but you know what I mean. And so that's a big part of it, but it also takes a lot of training. It takes a lot of specialization. Our head of ops, Katie Apperson, is amazing experience. She takes that stuff really, really seriously. She has a lot of conversations with me and my partner, Tiger Saliba, who's also just world class in that. He moved here from Beirut. He had a bunch of restaurants and nightlife stuff, and his ability to sense what's going on in a room and cater to needs in sort of a selfless way, but that doesn't feel, that it feels real. You know what I mean? He's not putting on a show. Yeah. He really cares about people's experience, right? Katie really cares about people's experience. And I think that kind of top-down leadership extends into it, right? And then it also takes specialization, right? We have teams who have more experience, maybe in nightlife and lounges and bars and that kind of stuff, who make sure that teams that may be more used to sort of waiting and food and culinary side, that they're learning from each other. And what's been really interesting to observe is the way that the team is evolving, right? And able to be a little bit more fluid, and that some of the people who are a little bit more nightlife are becoming a little bit more sensitive to sort of the dining experience. And people who are maybe a little bit more from the culinary side are starting to understand sort of as things get later into the evening, even the later dinner reservations, those people are coming with a different intention, right? They want to eat, they want to have great food, right? But they also want to have a couple drinks, right? They really are there for the party, right? This is to set them up for the night. And those people come with a really different intention. They might not be as concerned with like the swirl of the wine or the presentation, right? Where our early diners, that's really what they're looking for. They really need those details. They want to know where the food comes from and the origin story of the chef and all of those things. So it's really interesting to see these things sort of begin to synthesize.
What are your hours like? Like you personally, like you go to bed at you wake up and you're like a vampire, or like what is it like?
My hours are in a particularly funky place because I also have an 8-month-old, right?
So what time to start a business?
I got a baby and a BeyBey, and those two children have absolute one's a night owl and the other's a morning riser. So I drink a lot of coffee and Red Bull. That definitely helps. We have a great espresso martini that has definitely helped carry me through a couple evenings. But yeah, we do a lot of work here like during the day. Our actual operating hours is, so we have also a cafe. They have a separate operation team, thank God. They're the guys from Boca d'Or in the design district. They're brilliant. They're super creative. They're young, which allows them to have absolutely bonkers hours. So that's going on during the day. We primarily open at 5 o'clock for happy hour, and then we go till 2 Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, midnight on Wednesday, and then brunch. We just launched a happy hour on Sunday. We just launched a brunch on Sundays, which is more of a daytime thing, which is nice. I think our team also appreciates that. But I spend a lot of my time daytime here.
Really?
I'm having conversations with the team. I'm developing new assets. I'm coming up with the creative ideas, getting a lot of feedback. So I am I'm a huge fan of feedback. I want to know what's going on. I want to know how people are feeling from the team side, right? What is going on with them? What are the insights that they're seeing? And then I also spend a lot of time here sort of popping in randomly, right? So I obviously have a lot of guests here. People know me. I'm a local. We're setting up events, so there's a lot of that. But when I'm here, I'm sort of like kind of like to tuck away a little bit more, like touch tables, introduce myself. But really, I like to sort of be more in the cut and watch, like, where are people coming in and posting up? What time is that happening? So I tend to come a lot during like our shifts, right? So like when we're getting out of dinner service into the lounge, right? That 9:30 to 11:30 period is that's where things are changing, right? So that's where once it hits midnight, it is what it is, right? Early in the evening, it's primary dinner service. It's that this is new, right? There's not many places that have this kind of dual identity that's on flow, right? Some things are like, okay, this is a hard stop. We close at 10, and then the next thing opens at 11, and then till the two meet, right? We don't have that. There's a fluidity to our experience, and so I try to watch where those two rivers converge. Those two streams converge into a river.
You're also involved. You own and operate a award-winning bar, Medium Cool.
Oh yeah, no, I do not operate. I am a partner there, which came about because some former mentors and business partners of mine who are absolutely some of the best in the game, really like themselves are institutions in Miami. Guys like Dan Bankowitz, Jake Jefferson, Josh Wagner. Naren Young, who moved in from New York, but is visionary bartender. Danny O. These guys, they get the city so well, right? And they know how to bring just such a sort of interesting version of sophistication, but without pretension. That, in my opinion, is a big part of our fabric, of our identity here, right? But I think that's the core, that's the core identity of Miami in a real way, Miami Beach, right? People come here and they have this perspective of like, everything south of Fifth and the Sunset Islands, and God bless all those people and the 3 months a year that they live here, right? But the majority of the people are here, whether they have money or not. It's something different. It's not quite about, like, we're a very flexy city, right? We like to stun. Everyone likes the yachts and the cars and all of that, and it's cute. It's definitely, look, Miami Vice is like got a real thing. It made a big impact here. People like that, and it's fun, right? But there's kind of something in between that, and I think Medium Cool did just such a great job of capturing that, and feeling a little bit more open source and a little bit.
Like, just a cool bar, man.
Like,
we miss that sometimes here. And that's why when I heard about it, I was like, that's exactly what Miami, specifically Miami Beach, needed.
And I think it's about having being more authentically connected with with guests, right? And like really understanding that, like, well, look, you can open a place that's geared towards tourists and bachelor parties and bachelorette parties and that kind of thing. And like, that's cool. There's definitely a business to have here for that, right? You could be very, very successful. You could buy your own yacht off of renting people's yachts here, you know? But I think that if you really look closely, you can see that people, they just want to have fun and like in a sort of a really letting their guard down, right? Because that's where you have the most fun.
No, absolutely. All right, so you have a newborn, you got this place, you got medium cool. How do you unwind, man?
So really the beach, right? Like the thing that brought me back here after all the time on the road with Red Bull was like, I really just love the city, right? It's really, there's no other city in the whole country, very few in the whole world, that can be as sort of interesting and sophisticated and culturally unique and authentic, while also being so gorgeous, right?
Beautiful.
Like warm water, walking on the beach with my dog in the sand, taking the baby on walks around the park in South Point, and there's actually pretty good surf here. Like you kind of have to keep your eye on it, but like a lot of time doing that. So spending a lot of time outside. Going down to Coconut Grove, going up to Hollywood, and just really chilling out. I spend a lot of time at Soho House. I've been on the board there for about 10 years. And like, so it's you go into a different hospitality and you sort of become the guests instead. And there is kind of where I can relax and post up and just like
unwind.
Just sit in the waves and have someone bring me a great cocktail. It's like, I like to deliver that kind of experience. I also like to have that experience.
Good stuff, man.
Yeah.
Where can people find out more about you and your restaurant group and everything that you're doing?
So it's a little bit all over the place because there's stuff beyond hospitality. It's been difficult for me to sort of share all the fact that I also work in the psychedelics and mental health space is something that I'm really passionate about. And the fact that I've been on the board for New Deco Ensemble, which is like an orchestral organization that's sort of bringing things into the future, sort of a little bit more uniquely Miami take on classical music. And so really the best place for me is Instagram.
Okay.
I'm at Sammy Scryer, SammyScryer. It's not Sammy Scryer. A scryer is someone who like looks into a crystal ball and sees the future. So that's the way that I try to think about culture is like what's coming next. And so that's where I kind of post all the different things that I'm doing. But also I'm very easy if you want to email me and just ask what's going on or if you if you have an idea and you want to work together. I have also a consulting agency called Launch Sequence. So it's launchsequence.agency is the website. There's a form there and shows all the background and past clients from F1 and Ralph Lauren and whoever I've worked with. Or you can email me at Samuel Baum ls@gmail.com.
Awesome, man. Thanks for coming on the show, bro.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, man. Glad you got to come and check it out. You'll have to come and eat and have a couple, have the espresso martini yourself. You'll see what I'm talking about.